Hello and welcome to my bedroom. My name is James. I'm a graduate at a Big Four bank and I host a podcast called Graduate Theory, where I help people go from unsure university student to thriving early career professional. In this video today, we're going to talk a bit more about the podcast, and in particular, I wanted to cover some of the tools that I use and how I go about all the different workflows that go into a podcast. My podcast, Graduate Theory, has been something that I've been working on now for over 6 months. I've interviewed over 30 guests, and I've done this process quite a few times. And people ask me often, how do you do this? What tools do you use, and how do you actually go about this kind of thing? So this video today, I wanted to outline the tools that I use, what I use them for, and what are the kind of main steps in the podcasting journey that the tools are there to fulfill. The podcasting life cycle maybe is best looked at in terms of a guest. What is the guest doing and how are we facilitating that? So we first go from like reaching out to the guest, which is the first step. So we go from getting the guest, so reaching out to them, how do we find their actual information and their details? And once we've reached out to them successfully, how do we get them booked in? How do we lock them in to an interview? How do we do the whole calendarization process? And then how do we actually record once they're there, once they're at the time? How do we record the interview then? Step 4 is editing. So once the thing is done, how do we edit the interview? Number 5 would be, how do we upload the interview after we've edited it, and how do we share it? And then bonus number 6 is just, what is kind of the general tools that underlie all of these things? Like, how do I know what stage a guest is up to? How do I manage the podcast more generally and share the content more generally as well? So that's what we're going to talk about today. And the first step is getting the guest. So how do we actually go and get the guest and be like, the guest is now someone that we don't know to someone that is known, and we can reach out to them. And Graduate Theory is a professional sort of focused podcast, and a lot of the guests I get on, I source like through LinkedIn, whether that's usually me DMing them, or sometimes I'll even get their email or whatever it is, but usually I'll try and find their details somewhere online. And there are some tools. So either I'll DM them on LinkedIn, or I will actually go and get their email and email them. And I found that to be quite effective. DMs on LinkedIn, it depends on who you are. Some guests will respond if you message on LinkedIn and won't in email, but others won't respond via LinkedIn DMs, but they will respond via email. So it kind of depends on the guest and how active they are on LinkedIn. Some guests are quite active, so they're going to see the LinkedIn messages more, but some barely use LinkedIn, but their email is still there. So you can use that as a way to contact them. Now, there are some tools that you can use, and these are free, to find people's emails on LinkedIn. So if you actually go on someone's LinkedIn page, they sometimes in their contact information, they'll have their email listed, but for most people that are reasonably high profile, they're not going to have that as publicly there. They want to keep that secret. So there's 2 tools that I use to find their emails. One is called Get Prospect. So Get Prospect, you can go on the page and you can click Get Prospect, and it will just find the person's email. Usually it's like their work email, which is a good start. Sometimes it will even find their personal email address, which is obviously they're more likely to respond to that. So that is a good thing to have. Another one that is slightly more powerful, and I think you can pay for this, is called Lusher. And this is quite similar to Get Prospect, in that you can go on someone's profile and you can download their contact information. Typically it comes with their work email as well, but you can sometimes get their personal email, which, like I've said, is a little bit more valuable, because the work email, there's heaps of stuff going on there, but sometimes the personal email address is you're more likely to get a response. So that's what I do with that, and that obviously helps a lot. The more personal that you can get, the better. Generally, the better, the higher response rate. So if we're reaching out to someone, I want them to respond, and so I want to do it in a way that's gonna get them to respond, and getting their personal email is key. The second step there is, how do we go from guest has arrived to booking a time? How do I go from the guest has confirmed via a message, and then we actually get them scheduled, and the tool we use for that is Calendly. So the guest can book a time in my calendar. Usually I do a pre-podcast call, so we go for 30 minutes and we just chat, get to know each other, and then we go to the 1 hour, which is the actual podcast interview. And Calendly is really great. I can add in automatic reminders. I can do all this different stuff. I do I do pay for Calendly. Some of the features there around automatically reminding people, that's a paid feature, I think. I pay 12 USD a month for Calendly. And that means it's really easy for guests to find time in my calendar. There's no, are you available on this day? Oh, I'm only available at this time. Back and forth. It's a pain in the ass. So it's nice to have this tool that lets people just book a time, like very straightforward. And it saves a lot of friction when it comes to these exchanges. The next tool we use is, we've got them locked in. How do we actually record the interview? And what I use here is a tool called Riverside. And Riverside is really one of the premier sort of tools for, recording interviews. There's a few out there like Zoom, you can record, Riverside. There's a couple other different ones, but Riverside I've found to be the best value for money. And that goes with like best recording quality and also the cheapest. So what Riverside does, and the reason why it's better than Zoom, is because we can record audio and video locally on someone's device, upload it to Riverside, and then I download that and use that to edit. So what that means is, instead of Zoom, is the quality is just generally better and it makes for a better podcast. Yeah, so Riverside, you do have to pay for it. I pay for 30, it's around 30 USD a month. That gives me 15 hours of recording, and that's more than enough time. That's 1 hour every 2 days. So you've got to be going pretty hard to go over that. But yeah, that's what I use to record. Riverside's been really great. There are sometimes some minor technical problems, but on the whole, it does do quite a good job, and it is a lot better than using Zoom. So yeah, really great tool there. The next part of the guest life cycle is editing. Once we've got the thing recorded, how do we go from a recording to something that is like the finished product? And the next step is to edit. The tool I use to edit is probably my favorite tool out of this entire setup. Is called Descript. And so what Descript does is I put in video or whatever it is, and it will transcribe that, and then you can edit the video based on the transcript. So if I remove a sentence from the transcript, that will remove that sentence from the video. And it just makes for a very seamless editing experience. This is by far the most valuable tool. It saved me the most amount of time, for sure. You can do all this different stuff in there. They have this thing called Studio Sound where it removes background noise. You can remove filler words through the transcript, and you can just select them all and delete them in literally a click. It's so good. You can watch through the video on 2x speed and find find stuff quicker. It is just, it's really great. And it's easily the best tool. You can publish to YouTube and Buzzsprout, which we'll touch on in a second, straight from Descript. So it is exceptional. I do pay 40 Australian dollars a month for this, but all the features are really great. It even does a speaker view, so I can alternate with it by speakers when they're talking, and that happens automatically with one click. So it does so much, and it's so valuable. And yeah, if you have a podcast and you don't have Descript, then I think you are missing out on some serious value. So I would highly recommend that one. The next part of the process is, how do you share the podcast and get it out there? And for that, I use Buzzsprout. You upload the audio file to Buzzsprout, and then it sends it to all the different podcasting platforms, so Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and all the other different ones. There's heaps of them that are out there, and Buzzsprout is the place to do that. I do pay for this, and I pay $18 USD a month for 6 hours of upload time in a month. Expensive, but it is slightly better than Anchor. So Anchor is the commonly used free tool. Anchor is free because Spotify can dynamically insert ads into your episodes. And also people say, we don't really want the podcasting sort of open source nature of things to be so dependent on Spotify. So that's another little reason why I like to support an independent podcast hosting tool. Because I think it's nice to have everything spread out and not necessarily all reliant on the one company. Cool, so now we've done that, our podcast, we've contacted the guests, they've recorded, we've edited, we've shared it. There are a bunch of tools that I use now that kind of underlie all of these processes. And the one that I use the most is Notion. And so Notion is that tool that I manage all this stuff in. So I create a file for the guest. I can keep a track of where they are in this process. I keep a track of my notes when I'm researching the guest before the episode, what I want to speak to them about, all that kind of stuff. I keep any notes when I'm editing, and I can keep that in the same file. I can do all this different stuff, and Notion is the tool that kind of underlies all these different steps. I can keep track of what episode is being released when. Does a guest need a certain thing? Like, I can leave that in the notes. It's really a fantastic tool and really versatile for this literally exact thing. So certainly really valuable tool. You can use that for free as well, which is fantastic. You can pay. I think you get a couple extra things if you pay like a little bit, but you don't need to do that for sure. Notion is certainly fantastic free tool to use for this whole management thing. And then the final tool that I use is like for my website and my content production. So when I release an episode, I have a newsletter that comes out every single week, and that it goes through Ghost. Now you could probably quite easily use Substack for this, but I'm not sure if Substack, if you can have a custom domain with it. Perhaps you can actually, but I'm not sure. I haven't really looked into it too closely. Ghost was my tool of choice. My website is pretty easily customizable. I have a newsletter in there, the episodes in there, and I think having my own domain, which is graduatetheory.com, there's some room for like building the SEO there and having it as a reasonably highly ranked website. I'm able to do that more effectively by having my own domain rather than graduatetheory.substack.com. That's a big plus there, is like the SEO side of things, so people can find me organically, and that's a big reason why I went for like custom domain and Ghost, so I could have the newsletter function like pretty much built in. So yeah, those are all the tools I used, and I went over them very briefly, but certainly the podcasting life cycle is a little bit complicated, and certainly one that I've improved at going through. So yeah, I'm hopefully going to touch on some more of this stuff as we go forward in the future. But yeah, that's the thing there. So we touched on like the main life cycle things, which were get the guest into your calendar, record the episode, edit, share, and then there were kind of some tools there that underlie that. So yeah, if you want to find out more, please get in touch with me, contact me wherever you can find me. And yeah, thanks so much for watching. If you did enjoy this, I'm going to release more content around podcasting and my processes for that, and also any other things that come to my mind throughout the day. Yeah, stay tuned for this. If you did enjoy, please subscribe to the channel, leave us a like, and drop a comment if you have any thoughts or any additions to what we've shared today. Thanks again for coming along and spending some time with me. I'll see you next time.